Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle. Me, in my series Freemasonry and Satanism. This is going to be a new book, series number 38, which is a replacement, one of the holes in my series, because I integrated some of the ones I did in 2013 and 2014 into series instead of individual videos when I started, if that made any sense. So when I started making videos, I just had video number 1, number 2, number 3. I didn't know I was going to start the series, like 12 two-hour videos on the Freemason Blue Lodge Handbook, and many other ones that I have made a couple or more videos. So as I went back and reshuffled the whole thing and tried to make it clearer, I have a couple holes, about 5 series numbers with no videos yet, because I moved those videos into another number. This is going to be one that's kind of fascinating. Intruderes. The Incredible Visitations at Copley Woods. Budd Hopkins. It's been a fascinating book. I'm up to page 107. And as we already know, I highlight stuff and only read the highlighted pages. I'm not trying to do an audiobook here. If you like what I'm reading and you think it's interesting and important, go buy the book. Let's give the authors, probably Budd Hopkins is dead, but maybe, I don't know exactly how that works, but maybe family members or whatever inherit the rights. So Budd Hopkins, Library of Congress, 1987, first edition. We read a little bit from the back of this. Whether you are a physicist, a housewife, a UFO researcher, or a dabbler in the occult. It's interesting he uses that word in this, UFOs. This book will almost certainly strain your credibility to the breaking point. The human mind often cannot accept or even vividly imagine an unrealistic or deeply unpalatable truth. Though we can entertain almost any wild idea, in theory, a profoundly unsettling concept can be almost impossible to really believe, despite the weight of evidence and the pressure of logic. So like I said, I've read a little more than half of this book, page by page, highlighting everything. And my question in my mind is Budd Hopkins telling the truth? The people that he investigated who had apparent UFO abductions happen to them, alien abductions, are they telling the truth? So I'm sort of a skeptic. But the believability increases with the number of different researchers, and those researchers, their story, what they did, and the number of people who were abducted that they researched. It just starts multiplying and multiplying. And you start to say to yourself, okay, to be fair, let's believe what I'm about to read. Not that that's going to be something really crazy. And then at the end of this video, and after some investigation, what are we to think? So with that said, let me show you a couple other books I have. I've shown many of my UFO books in previous videos, but I am continuing to buy more. So let's take a look at some of the future books I have to read, which should make interesting videos. Here's one by Jordan Hoffer and David Barker, Little Gray Bastards, The Incessant Alien Presence. Oh my. That ought to be interesting. Another one I have here, The Dark Side of Alien Visitations, The Song of the Greys, Nigel Kerner. So as you can see, I've got some work to do. Bloodlines of the Gods, unravel the mystery of the human blood type to reveal the aliens among us. And you can see here they got something like an ET, a gray alien, Nick Redfern, and the other half of the body is human. What am I going to find when I continue this research? Another one, and I watch videos on YouTube, and I listen to these authors and read books, and they give me names, I go look it up, and I buy them. Secret Life, First-Hand Accounts of UFO Alien Abductions, David Jacobs, PhD. Here's a guy with a PhD. So again, I say, what am I to believe? So when I read from this other book here, Budd Hopkins, give it some credit. And then put that in your hat and say, man, what do I believe about reality now? Gray Aliens and the Harvesting of Souls, Nigel Kerner. Harvesting of Souls. Another one I found, when I look these up, I find books I didn't expect to find when I go on the search engines of used book sites or new book sites. Blood Prince of the Gods. The last one we looked at was Bloodlines. Howard West, Blood Prince of the Gods. An enlightening book on outstanding simplicity. Learn today from the historical facts and esoteric doctrine. Esoteric, secret teachings to selected individuals who get initiated into these secrets. How aliens created the first human, Neanderthal, a creature the ancient Sumerians called Adamu. I guess this is Howard West here on the back. So there you have it. This ought to be interesting. Little Gray Bastards. So let me read from Budd Hopkins' book and we'll see where that takes us. So I'm going to start reading at chapter 4, page 72. I read the other two chapters, Kathy in New York, The Missing Hour, The September Letter, and that was 3 chapters. And it just sets the stage about how we met her and the different small details. But when I reached chapter 4, I said to myself, this is the chapter I need to read. This is going to get right into the dirty details, just the facts, so we can ponder and try to figure out what we believe or what we don't want to believe. Robbie, Tommy, and the Boogeyman. So apparently Budd Hopkins wrote a previous book, and it became quite popular. We'll get to the title of that in here, I'm sure. And people were contacting him to try to tell him about their alien abductions, and he did some seriously thorough investigations. And used psychiatrists and hypnotists and psychologists and doctors. So he took the long road to try to figure this out. So let's see what he says. Kathy now was one of the persons who were abducted. I was home alone with the kids. I kept thinking I saw something every now and then out of the corner of my eye. But then I'd turn and look, and there would be nothing. It was really strange. It kind of spooked me out. Moving on, highlighted portion. If I'm jumping around, that's what I'm doing. I'm only reading my highlighted portions, as you know if you watch my videos. I awakened by this blood-curdling scream. So Kathy had 2 boys. I nearly had a stroke as I came flying off the bed, and I ran into my kid's room. It's my son Robbie. Because of the creepy feeling that I was having all that night, it really jolted me. He was lying on the bed stiff as a board and pale, and his eyes were wide as quarters. So he says, "Mommy, this ain't no dream." So I brought him into my bedroom and asked him what happened. He said, "Mommy, a man with a big head came in my wall, came right through the wall." Interesting first point. "And went in my closet and kept going back and forth. And he wouldn't let me move." So somehow this creature with the big head just could look at the boy, Robbie, and put him in a paralyzed state. And he kept going back and forth, I guess, in and out of the room. Doing what? He wouldn't let me move, and he had lights around his head. And Kathy said, "Honey, it's just a bad dream. You know." And he said, "The man wanted Tommy." So she has another son, Tommy. "Mommy, the man wanted Tommy, Mommy. He wouldn't let me move." I said, "What did he want Tommy for?" And he says, "I don't know." So Kathy asked her son, "What does the man with the big head coming through the wall want Tommy for?" And the little boy said, "I don't know." So now Kathy obviously gets a little concerned. So I left Rob in my room, and I went in there and grabbed Tommy, and I turned the light on and picked him up. And I swear, it was probably by that time my imagination was freaking out. But I could have sworn I saw a flash of light in the closet out of the corner of my eye. So she runs in there to go see her other son, and she sees a flash of light in the closet. Like I said, just the details. Can't read it all. I'm not trying to do an audiobook. Moving on. Subsequent conversations lent more details to this disturbing account. Robbie mentioned several days later that the man with the big head had an invisible mouth. So like the gray aliens, they say they have little, just tiny slits. When Kathy asked him how he knew that, he replied that the man's mouth was invisible because whenever he talked, to me, nothing moved. So apparently the alien was talking to the little boy telepathically. And so it says here, according to the author of the book, a wonderful, apt 4-year-old's view of telepathic communication. So the little boy didn't know about telepathic communication, so just said the man with the invisible mouth. That's where you get some of this believability in this stuff. The man wouldn't let me move is, I suspect, his description of physical paralysis, another staple of these reports. And apparently Budd Hopkins would know. As we know watching my videos, I am a full spectrum researcher, everything from the Kabbalah, the secret societies, the Illuminati, the Zionists, and UFO, aliens, psychic research, and so much more. Because I'm putting all that in my head, and I'm coming out with one answer. I think it's all connected. So it's taking me a while, which I knew it would. Now we're into going on year 13. So I think I can say with a little authority at this point, some conclusions when I start reading this stuff. Page 74 on the bottom. But in the morning, when she went in to get them up for breakfast, she found Tommy covered with blood. He was sleeping peacefully, yet there was blood on the wall, on the bedclothes, on his face, blood seemingly everywhere. Kathy picked him up and raced off to the hospital emergency room. The doctor examined him and found that he had suffered a massive nosebleed, apparently without waking up. Even more disturbing, the doctor discovered a small hole high up inside Tommy's nostril. So, some kind of surgical instrument, the man with the big head, the gray alien I suspect, by the description we're going to see, punctured through the top of the nose into the brain with this instrument, and obviously caused a lot of blood. Moving on, again, so if I'm jumping around and throwing my 2 cents in, I'm not reading everything. When I read this recently, I just highlighted the stuff that I thought was important and I wanted to talk about. My mind immediately registered a different thought. Robbie mentioned that the large-headed man had said he had come to get Tommy. Was it possible that one of the tiny BB-like implants, the BB-like holes or implants, had been installed high up in Tommy's nasal cavity and had for some reason not taken? So that would be the author of this, Budd Hopkins, theorizing, so that they put these little BB implants in people and maybe right through the nose cavity break a hole and stick it up in there. I've got friends who say that they know that they are microchipped or have implants in them now. And they've gone to the doctors, they've contacted senators and representatives of government, and everybody seems to blow these people off. You go on YouTube and start watching some videos. And apparently the government and the powers that be are aware of this stuff. One of the many letters I had received in response to Missing Time, that was Budd Hopkins' first book, Missing Time, was from Margaret Bruning, a resident of Central Ohio. She awoke as she heard her name called. So that's another common denominator. You're laying in bed and you hear this, Margaret Bruning. So she heard her name call and woke up. She was told to go into the kitchen, where she saw 3 men standing outside the back door. They're wearing uniforms, but they're not police. She recalled later under hypnosis. They came into the house as the hook of the hook and eye lock magically lifted with no one touching it. So you know those little locks you hook down on a little ring? It just magically lifted up. The men have bad eyes, she said, but they don't have a mouth, no lips. Moving on, page 76. Margaret is carried outside, apparently by these 3 creatures, toward a large metallic object which stands partly on her family's land and partly on her neighbor's property. Her tone is one of amazement. What is that, she says. If Mr. Hartman saw it there, she'd call the police. That would probably be the neighbor. Ultimately, she is taken inside the craft and subjected to a typical physical examination and later returned to her bed where she falls peacefully back to sleep. When I awoke in the morning, my shorty pajamas had dried blood all over them. I had a pip of a nosebleed in my sleep. It had clotted in my braids and a bit had pooled in my ears, blood. My mother was awakened by the sound of my vomiting. I had swallowed a great amount of blood in my sleep. Moving on, the UFO phenomenon seems to exert nearly complete control over the behavior of abductees, so they can just, I guess, mind control you and put you into a zombie-like state and make you do their bidding and relax while they do their medical examination, etc. In this context, one can understand how a child can undergo a serious nosebleed, even swallowing quantities of blood. Moving on. The figure comes into the room, immobilizing Robbie, telling him that he's here to get Tommy. So why would the big-headed, no mouth, no lips, telepathically tell Robbie that he's coming to get Tommy when he came through the wall? Robbie is then switched off. So this is Budd Hopkins, again, explaining his point of view. Put into a state of suspended animation, and Tommy is either taken out of the room for his examination, to implant, or the operation is carried out there in the house. If he is taken into a UFO, he is returned a bit later, tucked into bed, and Robbie is switched back on into normal consciousness, whereupon he sees the figure bending over Tommy's bed. So Tommy was in the same room, or was it a different room? And screams for his mother. Kathy rushes into the boy's room in time to see the last flicker of light, the last trace of the figure's presence, and then things gradually return to normal. So moving on, Budd Hopkins says, in Missing Time, I described the case of Mary, a woman friend of mine and an artist. Though we never unlocked the details of an on-board UFO abduction experience, apparently her amnesia block was powerful. Neither she nor I, for many good reasons, ever doubted that she had had such an encounter. A few years ago, when I was visiting her studio, she recounted a strange recollection from the middle 1960s. Mary and her husband were sleeping soundly when they were awakened by screams from both their sons, who were Robbie's and Tommy's ages, at the time 4 and 3. Mary's husband rushed into the boys' room and found them cowering in their beds. A boogeyman with a big head had come into their room, moved back and forth from the closet to their beds, back and forth from the closet to their beds, frightening them nearly to death. 20 years later, when I interviewed the older boy, now a graduate student in college, he could clearly recall the figure. It was short and had big eyes. Sounds like a gray alien. It also seemed to have an aura of some kind of glow around it. Now that's important. So it's some kind of aura or glow around it. So it seems to me it could be a manifested being, and that could be more material solid and less, and that would probably explain why it could walk through walls. From my research, even in seances in the 1840 to 1940, when they had the Psychical Research Society of Europe and the Psychical Research Society of America, when they had seances, all the medium, the lady who ran the seance, the psychic, everybody would hold hands, and then she would call this entity to talk to, maybe a family member who had died, whatever. And if something appeared and did the speaking or table rapping or whatever else, and then when it disappeared, there seemed to be this jelly-like stuff on the table and on the people. So apparently when these beings manifest in our world, they draw from the substances of the people in the room, called plasma, by the way. And then when they leave, that plasma just drops down like goo. Something I've seen on the Ghostbusters movie. FYI. So 20 years later, she interviewed the boy. It was short and it had big eyes. It also seemed to have an aura of some kind of glow around it. So there we go. Some of these light beings we've been talking about. I don't think I could move while it was there. It seemed to speak to my brother, but I don't know what it said. It appeared to come out of the wall behind the dresser. So this is the second example here. And that's the way I think it left. Moving on. The pattern of these generational encounters is clear. Sandy Thomas, the Florida abductee, discussed briefly in chapter 2 of this book, has a young son named John. When I visited her early in 1985, I asked her if she had ever mentioned any odd occurrences that she might see as related to the UFO phenomenon. She said that sometime in the fall of 1984, her boy had come into her bedroom in the middle of the night, crying and complaining that a man with a big head and funny eyes had come out of the closet and scared him. Something pinned him down and bit him on his back, and in fact his back still hurt. That's 1984. And if you go look up my videos, I'm not quite sure of the series number, but you can just type in Freemasonry and Satanism and Night Siege. And apparently in 1983 and 84, over Connecticut, Western New York, Western Massachusetts, there were these gigantic triangular aircraft, UFOs, hovering in the sky or moving away or coming into view. And on the interstates, whole lines of cars were pulled over and everybody was outside their vehicle gawking up at these things. And in one of many examples in Night Siege, when one of the big gigantic triangle-shaped things that blacked out the entire sky, almost like the size of a football field, started moving away, this guy thought, no, don't go, I want to see you some more. And the craft, or whatever it was, actually started to come back to the guy. Of course, then it freaked him out. Alright, moving on. I could see for myself what she had found. Raising his shirt, she pointed out a small but distinct circular scar of the same type Kathy and her mother have on their legs. So I'm just reading my highlighted portions. Visible physical evidence only confirmed her worst fears. In February 1986, 2 years and 3 months after the Robbie's Terra and Tommy's nosebleed, Kathy called to tell me of a frightening experience the night before. Shortly after she put the boys to bed, Robbie wakened and came into her room. He told her that there was a red tarantula moving slowly down his wall, and he was afraid and wanted to sleep in her bed. She asked about the tarantula, and he explained that it was a round red light with rays sticking out like legs. So a red light on the wall with streaks of light coming from it looking like legs. And it moved, and as it moved it looked like a spider, and he was scared. So maybe it was some kind of mechanical device, glowing, or some kind of entity that manifested in that shape, moving around. A lot of people have seen the red orbs and orange orbs. In my previous videos, I've shown pictures of the one night I saw 6 or 7 orange orbs helter-skelter following each other through the sky, and then they went up. I've shown the pictures. A little later, as she was lying on her bed watching late-night television, she looked up and, to her horror, saw a small, gray-skinned figure walk past her door. So she's laying in bed watching TV. She looks, her door's open, and just casually walking by is one of these gray aliens. I looked right at him. It was the same little guy. He didn't look at me or anything. He just walked by, like I wasn't there. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I started to hyperventilate, then I jumped up. And as I started to go in the hall to my mother's room, there was a bright flash out my window that I could see out of the corner of my eye. The guy was there. So can these things leave another dimension, and these portals that open, do they create these flashes? You just imagine there's nothing standing here, and all of a sudden there's a flash like a bright light, and I step through it. And then when I'm leaving, in front of me, this bright light, and I step into it, and I disappear. Just makes one ponder what the heck's going on here. That's why I do these book reviews. So maybe we can get to the bottom of this. And I've got quite a few UFO series numbers, book reviews I've done. So please go look them up. And on my website, rickmiracle.com, go to the front page. And on the top left is a obvious little thing you can click that says a list of the videos on YouTube. And you can cut and paste that and make your own little cheat sheet so you know what you want to watch if you just want to watch UFO videos from book reviews I've done. I asked Kathy where the little figures seemed to be coming from. He was coming from my boys' room, right next to mine. I suddenly remembered the little red light that had driven Robbie away, leaving Tommy alone in the room. My final request was for Kathy to make a simple schematic outline, drawing of the figure she had seen, and then to make 3 other distinctly different figures, drawings on the same page. So Budd Hopkins wanted to do a little test, and he said draw a picture of what you saw, draw 3 other pictures of some kind of other creatures that don't look like that, and show it to little Robbie, and then he picked out a little gray alien that she had seen. So apparently these kinds of tests give us more proof that this probably happened. Moving on. My eyes were shut, though, and I was real relaxed. I knew I was on a table. I guess this was Kathy. I sensed I was laying real flat. It wasn't my bed. It was like I was starting to wake up. And I opened my eyes, and I'm looking down because I'm lying flat, and this guy looks at me, the same guy I've seen before with the big eyes, same gray alien. The minute I looked at him, he looked at me, and he had his hand on my abdomen. He says to me, "How are you feeling?" Probably telepathically. He was a real gentle, real pleasant, you know. He kept looking at me, and then I felt somebody rubbing me on the temples, real easy, like a massage. And I shut my eyes and went back to sleep. So apparently she's laying there in this examination table, and something behind her rubs her temples, and she just falls asleep. I asked Kathy if she was frightened when she saw the man with the large eyes. No, I wasn't scared at all. He just asked me how I felt, and I said real drowsy, real tired, kind of crampy. Moving on. I was sleeping in my nightgown and panties, and when I woke up, my panties were on the bed up by my hip, right next to me. I guess I could have taken them off in my sleep, but I've never done that before. So apparently, when they took her from her bed, took her to the examination table, took off her clothes, and then returned her, they didn't bother to put the panties back on. They just put them in the bed next to her. Kathy said the next day she felt very crampy, as if she were having an unusual, difficult menstrual period. So here they had taken her to this examination room, had their hand on her abdomen, and now she's having these unusual pains and feelings. She experienced strongly localized pain in her lower abdomen, in the region of her left ovary. Well, it didn't take a lot of thinking to try to figure out what's going on here. The second scenario is more disturbing. In this reading of events, the UFO occupants came into the Davis house. He took both Kathy and Tommy while holding Robbie in a switched-off state until their mission is completed, and mother and son are returned to their beds. This encounter, which includes the placing of an implant on little Tommy, the bleeding nose, has been planned to coincide with the ideal time of the month to remove the ovum from Kathy, an operation which nonetheless causes her some pain and later discomfort. Her nightgown is pulled down, her panties are left on top of the covers, and Robbie is allowed to return to normal awareness. This is Budd Hopkins talking. Though it is an extremely uncomfortable issue to face, the fact remains that from the beginning, publicly reported UFO abduction accounts contain details which unmistakably point to an interest by UFO occupants in the process of human reproduction. When Betty and Barney Hill, some famous abductees, were abducted in 1961 and recounted their stories separately under the hypnosis of Dr. Simon, so all these professionals are involved, Barney Hill recalled that a sperm sample had been taken from him by his captors. Betty described the painful experience of having had a long needle inserted in her navel in what her captors said was a pregnancy test. Moving on, an abduction report which preceded the Hill encounter, Benny and Barney Hill, and which by contrast became widely known only among UFO investigators, was the 1957 Vilas Boas case. In this Brazilian incident, Antonio Vilas Boas, his name, a 23-year-old farmer, was plowing a field by moonlight one night when a football-shaped object flew over him and landed near his tractor, coming to rest on 3 supporting legs. So like I said, I love the facts in these books. Kind of gives us a perception, a view of what this stuff might be. And if we read enough books, which I have, and I'm going to read more, I'm collecting more. I've got 3 coming in the mail I just ordered today. I didn't know there were so many UFO books. According to his account, the tractor's electrical system failed, and he was seized by 3 of the UFO occupants. He was taken inside the craft, undressed, sponged with a clear fluid, then a blood sample was taken from his chin. He was then put alone in a small room, which soon began to fill with a grayish vapor of some kind. He's in this room, naked, and a grayish vapor is being poured into the room. Shortly after this, a small woman with large slanting eyes entered the room naked. So one of these gray aliens, a female, goes into the room. He described her as being very white-skinned and as having almost white hair, high cheekbones, and barely visible lips. But suddenly, and under the circumstances inexplicably, he found himself sexually aroused, and an act of intercourse followed. Just before the woman left the room, she pointed to her belly, and then, looking directly at him, pointed to the sky. So what is she saying, you know? I'm having your baby and I'm from up there. The meaning of all this to Vilas Boas was that she had become impregnated. The Brazilian investigator who worked on this bizarre case, Dr. Olavo Fontes, claimed that there was extensive medical evidence to support the Vilas Boas account, and that he had been unable to shake the man's story in any way. Vilas Boas represented himself in the story as having been subdued and stripped of his clothes by 3 small men, and then somehow being induced to vomit before an odd-looking female made her appearance and evidently had her way with him. All apart from the fact that his recollections of the ship and its occupants fitted patterns that we have come to recognize from many later cases. So it's not an unusual case. A number of female abductees I've worked with recalled operations similar to Betty Hill, which suggested a laparoscopy-like procedure And again, I put these descriptions on some back shelf in my mind. But as these apparently reproduction-focused cases accumulated, I realized that the issues could not be avoided. The Copley Woods affair had been crucial to my awareness of what I now believe to be the central purpose behind the UFO abduction phenomenon. Over the past 6 years, I have worked with 4 male abductees who have described encounters very similar to Vilas Bowe's abduction, and 3 others whose incomplete accounts strongly suggest such an event. I know of no case in which a female abductee has ever reported an act of intercourse. So they've done it to several men, but they've never had any of these beings, I guess, having a male phallic unit to do it to a female. But they have taken the ovaries from female. Just interesting. The descriptions are invariably of a detached clinical procedure instead, even if some of them result in a more or less involuntarily ejaculation. Now all of this leads to the unwelcome speculation, inference that somewhere, somehow, human beings, or possibly hybrids of some sort, are being produced by a technologically, obviously, yet not inconceivably superior to ours. So maybe these aliens have a superior technology than we have. Wouldn't surprise me. And if that possibility is not enough to induce paranoia, in the hardiest, consider this. With our own current technology of genetic engineering expanding day by day, is it not conceivable that an advanced alien technology may already have the ability to remove ovary and sperm from human beings, experimentally alter their genetic structure, and then replant the altered and fertilized ovum back into unknowing host females to be carried over the term. In the speculative paragraph above, I use the word alien to describe the UFO phenomenon for a very precise reason. The word alien defines negativity. It says what something is not rather than what it is. It means basically other than, foreign, different. Whatever the nature and origin of the gray-skinned UFO occupants, and there are many exotic theories, they are not us. They are physically, culturally, technologically different from us. They are alien. They have been called angels, demons, robots, space travelers from another solar system, ultra-dimensional time travelers, and so on. But there is one essential fact. They are not us. They are alien. All right. I took a break. Back to the video. And as such, their purposes and goals, even their mental processes, are possibly unknowable by us humans. However, from what I know about our physical makeup, our anatomy, I can infer that if the human sperm and ovum have been taken as the evidence implies, then human beings are possibly being produced in an alien context. But at that point, safe speculation must stop. We simply cannot guess at the purposes of such a program within an alien culture. With the Christmas season approaching, the earliest I could fly to Indianapolis, that would be Budd Hopkins, to interview Kathy to continue his investigation, was in the latter part of January. I was very eager to go there, to meet Kathy's family, and to see things for myself. In the meantime, Kathy and I communicated by telephone, and to no one's surprise, more odd events rose to the surface. Kathy's original letter to me described a missing time UFO experience that occurred to her older sister Laura as a teenager. Kathy's original letter to me described a missing time UFO experience. I just said that. Over the years, Johnny had heard his wife tell about her UFO sighting, and by the fall of 1983, he was aware of the marks on the Davis's backyard and my investigation of the case. Johnny is something of a good old boy, a Southerner, with a calm, I got to see it, believe it attitude towards the world. He would seem to be the last person in the world able to tolerate a strange UFO experience. So his reaction was understandable when it happened to him. He was as confused as he was frightened. In November 1983, that same busy month, Johnny and two friends of his went on a hunting trip near Spencer, Indiana. They were staying in a small cabin they owned together. Johnny awoke early, before dawn, and walked into the living room. Through the window, he could see a bright beam of light shining down into the nearby wood. But he could not make out the source of the light. It moved this way and that, soundlessly, as if searching for something. A moment later, he noticed two figures standing outside near the cabin, and he assumed that they must be his two hunting companions. He decided to call to them, to direct their attention to the strange light. But here his memory of that pre-dawn period ends. The very next thing he remembers is standing in the living room, after the sun had already risen, watching his friends prepare breakfast. He told me later that for some reason, he felt that he should not mention the particular light to them, nor his confusion about the missing hour or two. So it's pre-dawn, he's in his living room, he noticed some strange lights, and then poof, it's 2 hours later, and he's sitting or standing there, and his friends are making breakfast. Missing 2 hours. Moving on this highlighted paragraphs. In December, on my way to work about 5:30 a.m., Johnny slowed to a stop before pulling out onto the main road. Almost automatically, he glanced up into the rearview mirror and saw a man sitting in his back seat of his vehicle. Unbelievingly, he turned his head and looked over his right shoulder. The figure, apparently a normal man, was wearing what Johnny later described as somewhat resembling a big Western hat. He appeared solid, darkish, clearer in silhouette than in surface detail. Johnny panicked. I suppose I would too. Somebody sitting in the back seat of my vehicle. I jump in there, unlock it, and get to go somewhere. Pulled on the brake and jumped out of his truck. He ran 20 feet or so and turned around. As one might have guessed, the truck was empty, and the surrounding open ground provided no cover for a running figure. So this man just disappeared. When I interviewed him, he told me that he thought the event in the woods and the sudden appearance of the man in his truck were somehow connected. So he thought that the lights he saw in the woods in his 2 hours of missing time and the truck experience were connected. But the UFO phenomenon, whatever it is, reserved even more terror for this good and gentle man. I will not discuss this later event in any detail, but in the spring of 1984, after a mysterious problem with his new truck, Johnny found himself confronted on a dark road by two very small men who seemed to just appear there. He remembers that they spoke to him without making sounds, telepathic communication, and that subsequently he lost a period of more than 6 hours. This experience so frightened and confused him. His wife told me that he apparently found it difficult to remain anyplace by himself. For days after that, when Laura left the room, where she had been sitting with him, he would get up and follow her. So he was really frightened. He didn't want to be alone. She said he acted as if he were afraid to be alone in his own house even for a moment. Over the years, I have developed a special interviewing method to use with small children in UFO cases, says Budd Hopkins. Over the years. An investigator must be careful not to trigger suddenly a child's semi-forgotten traumatic memory, and on the other hand, he must find a way to separate real experiences from dreams and fantasies. In a recent case, the father, an abductee, reported that his 7-year-old son described a dream in which he said little men came into his bedroom. So another example here. Lifted him up, floated him out the door into the living room. They kept telling him not to worry. Everything will be all right. You won't be hurt. He was floated out the front door, into the yard, where he suddenly ascended up into the sky. Later he awoke in bed, thoroughly frightened. So apparently they took him from his room, took him up into this craft or something, and returned him to his bed. I think they put an implant in him or something. And I'm only reading the highlighted portion, so if it seems like I'm missing jumping around, I am. Go buy the book. I hope I am showing here that there seems to be enough detail. This one video here won't cover much, but I did read up to 107 pages. And it has me convinced that Budd Hopkins is telling the truth, and the people he's investigating are telling the truth, and there seems to be a lot of common denominators. Alright, I asked him if he had ever had a dream in which he was floating. So Budd Hopkins is now interviewing the little boy, trying to be delicate. Oh yes, he answered enthusiastically, and repeated almost verbatim the dream he told his father about the little men who floated him out of the house. Budd Hopkins says, I replied that some dreams feel crazy and some seem real, and asked about this floating dream. It seemed real, he answered, like I was really floating out of my room. Anyways, like the Copley Woods affair, it has turned out to be an example of an apparent UFO family study of at least 3 generations. The boy, his father and mother, his aunt and his grandfather all seem to have been abducted. Well, that's interesting. And so they wanted to find out if Robbie had seen, this little boy had seen a movie, and he had seen the movie E.T., and he wanted to tell me that he dreamed E.T. had come in his room. Continuing on, I asked Robbie if E.T. was the man with the big head and the invisible mouth that he had told me about before. No, he said, he's different. I dreamed E.T. came into my room. He didn't look like that man. He looked like E.T. And to show me the difference, he made a drawing that shows both E.T. and the little man with the big head in his room at the same time. Robbie tried to explain that one was a dream and the other really happened. He even showed me the place in his room where he thought the man came through the wall. So it says here there is a C illustration. So I think I'll take a break from reading the book, and I was looking for illustrations in this book. So apparently they did some serious study. They took pictures of the ground and the markings they reported that's in this book. Probably can't see too much with the video, but it's in this book. And markings on their bodies where apparently they had been punctured. A physical laboratory report here. 2 soil samples were submitted for evaluation. One was from the affected area, and the other soil was from an adjacent unaffected area. X-ray diffraction analysis showed no significant differences in the crystallized structure of samples A and B. The original color of sample A was lighter than the sample B. Additionally, sample A was more dense, less fluffy than sample B. Heating treated a portion of sample B for 6 hours at 800 degrees produced a visual color similar to sample A. So they had to take sample B, which was the unaffected area, cook it for 800 degrees for 6 hours, and it became the same color as sample A. Just showing you. Here's some of the descriptions of these beings, the illustrations in this book. So it might behoove anybody who's interested in this stuff to go online. I sometimes get books like this, some of the descriptions of the ship by people. Sometimes I get books like this for $3, including free shipping. Here's Budd Hopkins, if I haven't shown it. So it's about believability. Is this stuff real? So let me continue reading on here. See if we can figure this out. He even showed me the place in his room where he thought the man came through the wall. He had fear about the man with the invisible mouth. Came into my room and wouldn't let me move. My first trip to Indianapolis in January 1984 was by far the most crucial of the 4 visits. It led to the uncovering of a number of other apparently UFO-connected recollections of the Davis family and several of their friends and neighbors. Budd Hopkins says, "At no point did I find the slightest reason to doubt any part of the Davis's various accounts." And I know some people are skeptics. I'm a skeptic. You know, would a guy make all this up, or these common denominators, just to make money selling books? We have to look at it from both angles. Is it the truth, or is it a huge fabrication? And I've got a lot of books. I've read a lot of books on these subjects. So if it is all fabrication, it's a grand conspiracy that expands all over the world. So I've got books from Russia that were translated on the UFO incidences. Brazil, as we've heard. And all over, many countries all over the world. And then, of course, even in India, some of their ancient paintings have these UFO craft in the background. And all this other stuff I've been studying seems to indicate some kind of other kinds of beings, even in the Kabbalah or the Bible, the Nephilim, the Watchers. So I hardly believe that we're completely alone. So then it brings to question the mind, okay, if this is real, what do they want? Are they dangerous? Are they in cahoots with all these Zionist and Illuminati secret society Masonic witchcraft types? What are we dealing with? Hence, I keep making videos, pursuing the question. The Copley Woods affair was the strongest as well as the most complex UFO case I have yet encountered. And anyways, he's parting from his visit with Kathy, and she surprisingly says, "Bud, you know I have a daughter too." I sat there in silence, not knowing what she was trying to tell me. "I don't know where she is," she continued. "I never gave birth to her, but I know I have a daughter." So does she somehow subconsciously, or has she been taken to see her daughter in one of her abductions? Did they take an ovary out of her and create a child. I know I have a daughter. I think I've even seen her. I know what she looks like. And I know something else, she says. I'm going to see her again. I know it. All right, moving on to another chapter. The camping trip and other adventures. Just reading my highlighted portions. It was the July 4th weekend. Kathy, 16 at the time, traveled with Nan's family, one of Kathy's friends, when she was younger. Her parents, her younger brother, and Nan's boyfriend, Sam, to a cabin in a remote area of the park. So they went on this vacation. It's an old story, 1975, and Budd Hopkins, when he's interviewing Kathy, tells him about odd events when she was younger, even. It was Nan herself who reminded Kathy that something very unusual happened there. So Budd Hopkins is interviewing Nan, Kathy's friend, who this book is written about, the incredible visitations at Copley Woods. And Nan reminds Kathy of this event, which apparently Kathy had dismissed and forgotten. Let's see what they say. One dream that remained vividly in her mind involved her sitting in a truck at night, talking to someone over the CB. Suddenly the lights in the truck blink off, and the radio goes dead. She looks up and sees 4 lights descending, spinning like pinwheels. So it's just more little facts here. So you look up and this craft is descending, spinning like pinwheels. She then dimly remembered Nan's father's Chevrolet pickup, which in fact did have a CB radio. So under hypnosis or interrogation, she's starting to recover her memory. Don't you remember the boys who turned up that night? Who we had been talking to on the radio? So apparently these kids were out camping in their father's truck with a CB radio, just talking to people out there somewhere. You don't know where somebody is when you're talking to them by a CB radio. They're just within range, 1 mile or 5 miles. But anyways, the boys apparently wanted to see them. They were talking over the CB radio. They wanted to come and see us. I told them that if they could find us, they would be welcome. So the girls and the other people that were out camping did not tell these people on the CB radio where they were. I don't suppose anybody could actually find somebody else without some kind of electronic equipment. So anyways, they said, yeah, you can come see us if you can find us. And then all of a sudden, I remember seeing these lights coming down the road real slow. And the boy said on the CB, I see you. How would he know it's them on a CB in a truck? And then got out, and I got out of the truck and kind of met them halfway. It's kind of surreal. And we went into the cabin. There were 3 of them. The blonde guy said that they had been 4, but one of them didn't want to come. The blonde one was real cute. I got the idea he liked me, says Kathy. Next page, just some short snippets here. So anyways, we had some beer and talked. I think we went outside and built up a campfire. It was fun, and they stayed a long time. I think they were tall and skinny, and I think they looked alike. They never said anything. The blonde guy did all the talking. So there was 3 of them, and 2 of them were tall and skinny and wore similar clothes, like a uniform. And they never said anything. The blonde guy did all the talking. So they mysteriously are talking by CB. They mysteriously show up, and then there's going to be some more incredible descriptions here. So Nan's mother asked them what they wanted to drink. She said they have beer, Cokes, and coffee. They asked what she had the most of. I suppose that would have been the blonde guy. And she said beer, so they said they'd have a beer. I asked if they all sat down in the cabin, Budd Hopkins said, and talked when they came in. Kathy says, I don't think so. I think the other 2 guys just sort of stood there. One stood by the door. I don't think they ever said anything at all. So the two tall guys came with this blonde guy. One stands by the door, the other one stands someplace else, and neither one of them say anything. But the blonde guy seems really friendly with Kathy. The other two men, except that they were tall, skinny, wearing very similar clothes, neither could remember, page 92 here, Nan nor Kathy could remember hearing either of them speak. Each, however, could easily describe the blonde boy. Sam said that he was kind of short, stocky, wearing blue jeans and a matching blue jeans jacket over a yellowish shirt. So the two guys, like it says here on page 93, stood sort of like guards while the blonde guy ran things. Kathy, Nam, and Sam shared essentially the same memories of the evening. So Sam was Nan's boyfriend. And the same particular gaps in their recollection. So Budd Hopkins is interviewing them. I said we have more beer than anything else, and he said that's what we'll have. I know they stayed real late, but I don't remember much of what they said, except that they were part of a band. So now Kathy's going under hypnosis to try to focus more in on this thing that happened, and it does get stranger. I'm not really tired, so they're apparently going back in time under hypnosis, and she's in the truck. She's not really tired. I'm going to go play on the CB radio. This guy wants to talk to me, wants me to talk to him some more. So whoever she was talking on the radio wanted her to talk to him some more. Kathy, somewhat alarmed under hypnosis. It got real light out. This is nighttime now, like it was day. So here she is on the radio talking to these strangers, and it gets real light out like it was day. And the radio still works, but there is no voice on it, just static. There's something flashing off the hood of this truck. So some craft appears to be arriving, and it's all over the truck. So I look up in the rearview mirror, and I saw it. It's real bright, and it hurts my eyes. So she didn't remember this when she was just interviewing with Budd Hopkins, but under hypnosis, things become more clearer. I shut my eyes, and I can still see it coming through my eyelids. It looks like pinwheels. There we go again. And there's 4 of them, and there's something sparkly in the light, like sparklers or something. I picked up the radio, and I asked them who they were, what do they want from me, and the guys were still there, and they said they wanted to see me. So it's another description of her encounter, but this time under hypnosis. That one guy I talked to most, he was real nice. And he said, look down the road. So I did, and he said, I think I see you. And there was a car coming up the street real slow, and they pulled in and shut off their lights. Off before they pulled in the driveway, though. So first this bright light in the sky, the truck lights go out, but there's a little static on the radio. And then the guy says, look down the road, here we're coming. And before the vehicle gets close to the cabin, all the lights go out, so they really can't see the vehicle. We're assuming it's a car, which anybody would. Budd Hopkins says, I next asked Kathy about the car. Her description includes details which subtly suggest the vehicle was no ordinary compact car. The dirt road to the cabin was extremely bumpy and full of potholes. But Kathy said the car glided along without bouncing. Its light was very steady and even and didn't go up and down when it went over the bumps. So instead of going up and down over the bumps, it just glided along. That's what she said. Kathy described how the car left. They started going down the street. I could see a light in front of them and the sides, but they didn't have any tail lights. So when they did leave, it had oddities about it too, no tail lights. So she's still under hypnosis here. She's talking about this blonde guy. He's just smiling at me. He didn't say anything. I said hi, and he said hi back. I thought he was cute. She's under hypnosis. He told me he was the one who wanted to see me. He asked where Nan was, and I said she's in the cabin. He said, can we go see her? The other guys didn't say hi. So the two tall guys didn't say anything. So there's two variations of the story here. One which she can remember and Nan remembers, and one when she's under hypnosis. Her mom is in the kitchen, standing in the doorway, watching, and my head started to feel funny, around my eyes and between my eyes, and I remember that because I was getting dizzy. So they're going into the cabin, and everybody's up late at night, and some weird things are happening here. I don't know why they were all in there. The blonde sat down, but the other two never sat down. She's under hypnosis. One stood by the door, and the other stood on the other side of Nan's mom. Budd Hopkins says, can you remember what you talked about? Kathy says, about the CB, the cabin, and why we were there. Did they talk about their music? Budd says, no, not really. They asked me what kind of music did I like. And Kathy describes the guy. He had a round face, blue eyes, real light hair, like blonde hair. Wasn't yellow blonde, but it was blonde. Curly down to his collar, not tight curls, just lots of wavy curls, just cute. So anyways, moving on to this description here, what Budd writes. She said that the two silent companions weren't like him. Rather, that they didn't look like him. A choice of language that suggests perhaps unconsciously, more than just superficial differences. So there apparently was a difference between the two tall guys and this blonde guy, short, stocky. How consistently everyone draws a blank on his companions. So Budd Hopkins says all the people he interviewed, the mom, Nan, the boyfriend Sam, Kathy, they all are consistent in their descriptions of these three strangers who show up that they were talking to on the CB radio. She describes someone who could be her brother, even her muscular twin. My height, my size, a round face, blue eyes, shoulder length, blonde hair. So are the aliens actually introducing her to a twin self of hers? When I read this, that's what I thought. Just before he left, he kissed me on the cheek, and I felt really funny. Nice, but funny. I asked Kathy if she felt she had ever seen him before or since. Someone like him, yeah, since I don't know. I think I felt I already knew him. But I don't know where. I guess you do that with some people. So apparently this was some kind of interaction that was planned by maybe these gray aliens, part of what the abductions were all about. I asked, smiled with their eyes. Yes, made you feel warm and good. It was a phrase I've heard before in other UFO cases. Their mouths never moved, they smiled with their eyes. After I brought Kathy out of the trance state, she mentioned to me how strange everyone looked when she first took the three visitors into the cabin. I was sure some of them would have been in bed since it was late, but they were all up, just sitting there and standing, and the TV wasn't even on. So there was something mysterious when she did go in the cabin. The TV's not on. Everybody's just sitting there or standing there, like in a zombified state, if I'm reading this correctly. But Budd, they were just still, you know, not moving, like they were hardly awake and not saying anything. And my head started to feel funny between my eyes, and then the blonde guy spoke, and everyone kind of came to life and began to move and talk. It was really weird, like they had been asleep or something. So apparently these beings can put people in a trance in a whole room. If the Betty Anderson affair, documented by investigator Raymond Fowler in his book of the same title, And I ordered that book today, by the way, and 2 others from Raymond Fowler. Found them online for like $3 and $3 and one for $8. Abe Used Books. Alright, Betty had been taken from her house. So this is the Betty Anderson affair in Raymond Fowler's book, which I ordered. So here, Budd Hopkins is talking about something in that book. Betty had been taken from her home and into a landed UFO. After an extended series of events, she is returned to her captors and brought into the living room. She is startled to find her entire family sitting or standing there completely mute, looking like statues, completely unaware of her. Betty, in a hypnotic trance, described the scene. They're all sitting there motionless. My daughter Becky's there, and she's smiling and grinning. She seems to be awake. She seems as if she's up, standing up, just smiling at me. So when they transport her back into her room, everybody's just standing there like, that would be weird, wouldn't it? Her expression isn't changing now. She seems to be frozen in that smile. This disturbing, so similar to what Kathy saw when she entered the living room of the cabin. So Budd Hopkins, a serious investigator, has lots of resources to call on to compare different cases. Just like me reading all my different books, and I can start to see some of the common denominators. So it says here, as we have seen, one of the basic patterns of UFO abductions, part of the modus operandi, is the ability of the abductors, the aliens apparently, have to shut people off, as it were, for as long as the particular operation lasts. This procedure can be seen as a way of eliminating potential witnesses. This state of suspended animation has been reported by UFO investigators in widely differing situations, with varying numbers of abductees involved. In a Florida case, for example, 2 people were abducted from an automobile, while 3 other passengers were apparently switched off. In a 1975 North Dakota case, 2 were abducted while the 3rd was maintained in a suspended state. The details may change, but the method remains the same. Moving on, page 98. The focus of this strange event seemed to her to be her relationship with the apparently normal blonde man. So he's back to Kathy and the blonde man, who so resembled her and their conversation together. But there is something of a sequel to this encounter involving not Kathy, but her friend Nan. All right, moving on. So here we go. She was standing at the sink, the kitchen window, and suddenly she went cold with fear. Only a few feet outside stood a tall figure staring at her. So this sounds like this is Nan, Kathy's friend. He was dressed in a kind of long, tight-fitting coat, and on his feet he wore what Nan referred to as moon boots. Heavy, round, plastic footwear. Footgear. He simply stared at her, unblinking. After a few seconds, the ceiling light went on, and she could no longer see the man. So she walked into the kitchen, flicked on the light. It didn't come on, fluorescent light. And she's looking out the window, and there's this man just standing there looking at her, and all of a sudden the light comes on. The dog never made a sound. Anyways, her husband Sam rushes outside with the beagle when Nan exclaimed what happened. There was fresh snow on the ground, but no sign of either the intruder or any footprints. So one of these moon boots could make the guy hover. Nan later told me that the man seemed to be looking at her from close to eye level. which would have meant that he was either phenomenally tall or was not on the ground at the time. Naturally, one does not know what to make of this bizarre report. But she was so upset about it. Bud, she said, I called the police. I was that scared, and I've never called the police before in my life. The question then arises, were Kathy and her best friend Nan perhaps both central to the purposes, whatever they were, of the 1975 visitation at the Rough Rivers State Park, where those three guys appeared out of nowhere that they were talking to on a CB radio, and two of them never spoke but standing around like guards? One of the main reasons for my various trips to Indianapolis was to interview anyone who might have been a witness to the original June 1983 UFO landing on the Davis's property. The incident which led Kathy to contact me in the first place, Joyce Lloyd, the next door neighbor, who had described a flash of light from the direction of the Davises. So when they had that visitation or abduction in June 30th, 1983, that we've been talking about, and then the park incident, apparently the next door neighbor, Joyce Lloyd, was looking out her window and saw a flash of light. A few of the experiences she recalled, this would be Joyce, have been explored in depth with hypnotic regression, but several have not. The essential point, however, is that Joyce seems almost as deeply embedded in these strange events as the Davis family itself. Joyce has a round, scoop-type scar on her leg. I showed you the pictures a little earlier of those body parts with scars. Extremely similar to those of Kathy's and her mother's legs. So all three of these women have these similar scars. Something to do with their abductions and some kind of sample taking or operation or implantation. In 1981, Joyce was driving home from a visit to her mother's. So this is years later after the 83 incident. And though the route was familiar, she found herself becoming confused and disoriented. She remembers pulling off the road, but there her memory ends. Whenever Joyce left after a visit with her mother routinely called around the time her daughter should have returned home. This time she was over an hour late with no explanation for the delay. So here we have another missing hour or so. In the 1975 Kentucky experience, Kathy described her three visitors arriving in a vehicle which had decidedly unusual lights. And it didn't bump down the road, it just glided. When I interviewed Joyce in one of my later visits to Copley Woods, she told me about a strange experience she had had in the summer of 1984. She had wakened in the middle of the night upside down in her bed, alongside her normally positioned and peacefully sleeping husband. Well, that's weird. Her bare feet, which rested on her pillow, so when they put her back backwards, were wet, and the clothes she was wearing were also damp. She was cold and feeling very strange. She thought she had been dreaming because she recalled lying a moment before in a field next to an automobile. She recalled that she had just seen a light rising straight up at the edge of the field, and a second later she awoke back in her bed. So you get, before you get whatever they do to you, I guess if you get abducted, you remembered what happens just before then, and when you wake up after that, you remember what happened when you recover. We began a hypnotic regression session to try and find out exactly what was dream and what was, if anything, the literal reality. All right, Joyce says, I want to remember why I was upside down in bed. It was odd. You can see how much I'm reading here. And I'll be going over many books by different authors on these subjects, and I already have. So if you want to just go back on my website, rickmiracle.com, top left-hand corner, print out the cut and paste, or print out the list of my videos. You can just go through and see which series are UFO related and watch them and get some books on your own. You can go on used book sites or new bookstores and investigate for yourself. All right, Joyce says, I feel excited. She's under hypnotic state right now, and very anxious. I had on a pair of shorts and a t-shirt. My body's damp and cold. My feet are wet. How? What am I doing here? I don't remember going to sleep. So she's waking up on the ground outside, I guess. I don't remember going to sleep, but I was laying in a field. And there's a car. There's a car, and it's silver. It has funny markings on it. I think it's a car. I feel pinned to the ground. So they moved her to the ground. She feels pinned to the ground, and she thinks this craft is a car. Can't see. Black, silver. It's very round and long. I think it's a car. Joyce says it's dirty in the middle, like there's been a lot of traffic. So she sees this big circular spot in the grass. The grass is kind of burnt from the sun. There's still tall weeds on both sides. There's tall trees, but they're far away. There's a clearing and a hill, and I see a light. All I remember is looking at the light. I see the light go away. I don't worry about that because I think I'm dreaming. That's why I'm not scared. I know it has to be a dream. So again, I'm moving on down here. Joyce describes it. It's bigger than a car. Not a lot bigger than a car. Silver, like cars are silver. Joyce says, no, it's kind of flat. It's not real shiny. Bud says, taller than a car, or about the same height or shorter. It's longer but rounder. I don't see the door. Bud says, is this car on any kind of road? Joyce says, it's on dirt, where there aren't any weeds or grass. Moving on here. Bud says, does it have windows like a car? Like a car has windows. Joyce says, no, the windows are high. Bud says, how big is it in relation to a car? Maybe 4 times as big, Joyce says. Bud says, how about the height? About 3 times as tall as a car. Bud says, does any part of your body feel different, unusual? Joyce says, my neck hurts. Remember, when you go on a hypnotic state and you get regressed, you actually go back to that time. And you remember, you're almost talking like as if you're there during the hypnotic trance in the hypnotist's office. I played around with that a while. I found myself extremely able to hypnotize people after I read Dianetics by Ron Hubbard. And I used to have a lot of fun when I was much younger, when I traveled to Canada and other places. I was working at a major aerospace company for 10 years. And I would go into a bar up in Edmonton, you know, a nice fancy place at the hotel. And I was pretty much quite able to meet people and have fun. But I would tell people about my ability to hypnotize people after reading Dianetics by Ron Hubbard. And I would regress people and take them back to when they were 10, 7, 8, and ask them what their name was. And I always had a tape recorder. I tried to be professional so they could play it back and they could hear it. But what was funny is when I regressed people, let's say the girl's name was Tina, something like that, and I regressed her, let's say she's 25, and I regress her back to 10. I go, what's your name? Tina. 9, Tina. 8, TT. TT. 7, TT. So when she was little, just an example here, paraphrasing, she was called TT. She didn't remember that at 25. But when I regressed people and had a tape recorder playing, they would tell me things that they didn't remember, and then I would play it back, and it really entertained people. But anyways, the short story here is, one day sitting in a motel room, I tried to hypnotize myself, foolish me, and it gave me a headache, and I've never been able to hypnotize other people again. FYI. A little bit about hypnosis. And I plan on reading books again about that and trying it again. Maybe I should go see a hypnotic teacher, hypnotist, and they do have schools for that. And maybe relearn how to do it because it was kind of fascinating. So under hypnotic state, she says, my neck hurts. And Budd says, the back, the front of your neck, or the front. Joyce says, along my spinal column. Budd says, any sharp pain or an ache or what? Joyce says, it just aches. My eyes hurt. Like short stabbing pain, like when you look at a light. Budd says, how about your chest? Feels heavy. I feel like I'm glued to the ground. Like I couldn't move if I wanted to. Moving on here. Again, just relating some portions. I'm trying to do an audiobook. Go buy the book. I remember thinking, Joyce says, I saw something in her stepson's room. I remember seeing a face, but it wasn't a little person. It didn't have features like a person. There were eyes and a face. It was real bright. So there's another incident under hypnotic state that she's talking about. It was real bright. The body was luminous. Here we go with these spiritual light beings again, even mentioned in the Bible. The head was shaped funny, but it wasn't out of proportion. Kind of square at the top, and the nose was there were patches of shadow on the face. But the suit was luminous. It was tall, like a person. I've seen the face before. Budd says, you've seen the face before? Joyce says, I think I had. And yet, have you ever felt something's watching you? I had that feeling. It was like a dream. I didn't want to believe it. I told myself no. Joyce says, moving on here, there really aren't people like that. So she is recalling this face she saw, this person. And she's telling the Budd under hypnosis, there really aren't people like that. I don't understand. There really aren't people like that. So she's finding it hard to believe whatever it was she saw. Like the figure you saw in the hallway? People like this. Are there really people like this? It doesn't make any sense. So a lot of people, when they see things that just are outside of their ability to believe, not the norm, a lot of people go into that state of denial. You can't blame them. All right, we've got a couple pages to go. Page 104. I highlighted here, it doesn't make any sense. This is what people think when some of these things happen to them. How can I believe it? And yet, how can I deny it happened? Tracy, whose father, the singer Mel Torme, so that would be Tracy Torme, once told me of a very interesting UFO sighting of his own. Has several questions he routinely asks in such situations. First, he asked the abductee if he or she feels he was selected, hand-picked as it were, for the abduction. Every abductee he has spoken to has answered the question with a definite no. I feel like I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, or some such is the typical answer. Though most abductees feel that any subsequent abduction experiences they have had are deliberate, as if they had been somehow tagged. So they feel like the first UFO abduction, they're just at the wrong place at the wrong time, but then the ones after that, it's as if they were tagged. Next, Tracy asked if the abductee, having explored his own or her experiences, understands the purpose of the operation, has any idea why these abductions are occurring. Again, the answer is a unanimous no. Regardless of the specific images and quasi-medical procedures, the abductee has recalled with or without the aid of hypnosis. No one seems to understand what it all means. Abductees like Joyce and Kathy almost always ask us, the investigators, to tell them what it means, why it is going on, and I always have to confess the truth, says Budd Hopkins. I have no idea of the ultimate purpose of it all, or was that Tracy Torme. So even the investigators have no idea at all why they were abducted, why they had medical procedures, and why it repeated. Every abductee answers more or less the same way. I would give anything that this had never happened to me. So these people are not seeking fame or getting paid for this. It caused me a great deal of fear and anxiety and uncertainty. Tracy's final question is the most ominous. He asks if the abductee feels, now that his case has been explored to a certain extent, that the experience is over, that he or she will not be again subject to an abduction. The answer here is a unanimous no. Every single abductee I've worked with is sure it may happen again. If they want me, they can get me, is the general sentiment. I thought about that when I was reading this book and making this video. You know, do I want to become famous and become popular, and will that set me up as a target? Which apparently, which is happening with the Pizzagate stuff here, it's January 15th, 2017. We just had the election with Hillary and Donald Trump. And apparently a lot of these people investigating the WikiLeaks emails about the so-called Pizzagate, pedophilia. Apparently the elites are into this big time. But apparently a lot of them have been threatened by the elites. So it's kind of strange. And I encourage anybody watching my video to tell their friends and everybody else. But more people need to go look up this Pizzagate and all the associated videos and evidence and WikiLeaks. It certainly is seemingly real. It's just too bizarre. So I wonder about that and the satanic culture we're in right now, with the symbolism on the movie programs like Hunger Games, the movie, Divergent, TV programming, movie stars doing this, even the Obama, Bush, the Pope, and a lot of other elites doing the devil sign. And you relate that to Aleister Crowley's The Evilest Man Alive, studying into demonology, calling forth demonic beings like Lamb. I've gone over this in past videos. And then you start looking at this. It just makes me wonder, you know, seems like a lot of biblical connectivity here. Like there are evil forces out there, like I've been reading even in the Kabbalah. So I have to sort this out in my brain. That's why I read this kind of stuff and want to try to see what happened here. If they want me, they can come and get me, is the general sentiment. And I feel that way about making these videos, and other people in the Pizzagate investigation and other things. Not to not say, but how many people have been murdered who have been alternate news investigators? Quite a few. So there is this secret society out there, and I'm just trying to find out how it connects with this. And it seems to me, the more I continue my investigation, it does connect to this. So as far as the Pizzagate thing and all that stuff, I know it's distasteful. Like when I look up witches' holidays and stuff like that. And even my friends tell me, they say, Rick, this can affect you mentally. You shouldn't do it. And I say, somebody's got to do it. Apparently, if you go research it, 50,000 young children go missing every year, or much more, many more, in these satanic rituals of torture, rape, and sacrifice. So what is going on? What are they doing with the human spirit and the human soul? Can they open portals? When these people here in this book are walking through walls, they're abducting people and apparently creating hybrid people aliens. Back to the book. I can continue to get off on different roads here. The truth that emerges from these answers is a simple one. Abductees are not believers in some religion of outer space. They are not seeking publicity or other rewards. They are, at heart, confused and frightened by their experiences, which they regard more as a profoundly unsettling problem in their lives than as any kind of advantage. So the people who are abducted don't see any advantages to sharing their story. They're not doing it for fame. According to Budd Hopkins and from my other research. I mean, think about 911, for example. And to me, it's an obvious inside job by these same people that are involved in this Pizzagate thing. Child porn, child trafficking, and witchcraft rituals, holidays, events, sacrificing people. Some people say 911 was a human sacrifice thing on a specific day. Be curious to go look that up on the witches' holiday chart. But the 911, you know, that was done for a purpose. The Hegelian dialectic. It was done to trigger people, to blame the Middle Easterners, the Arabs, the Muslims, the natives, some of them Christians, some of them atheists, agnostic, who knows, Buddhists, Hindu. But for some reason, they're destroying all the cities and murdering the people and sending them to other places all over the world. There is a plan by some very evil forces, I believe. And I can tell you, and I was watching a video this morning, and another speaker at the video, he said, absolutely, you have to be grounded in your spiritual belief if you want to be protected. In the Bible it says, Proverbs, I shall be to those who seek refuge in me, I shall be thy shield. And many abductees, according to my research, who were abducted, cried out in Jesus' name, and they dropped him like a hot potato. So whatever seems that's coming about, what's going to happen in the future, it seems you need to be grounded in your spirituality. Believing in Jesus, apparently, will get you saved, protected. But apparently there's something coming, and we've been reading about the Kabbalah and the cycles and reincarnation. So apparently a lot of people are going to reincarnate into this evil world. 1,000 years, 7,000 years, I don't know. But a lot of people who are spiritually grounded, believing in Jesus, etc., will not be participating in this evil world. Will be going off to some other sphere, firmament, heaven, whatever you want to call it. Just an interesting thing about when you're reading this and you're trying to figure out what reality really is. I think there's a huge benefit to being spiritually grounded. And in my case, I trust Jesus. I believe he was a spiritual being. He came in a human body, like me. Of course, I'm not anything like that. He was the Son of God. I'm just another spirit and a human body, another soul. But he did come here to teach. And he did say to treat others how you want to be treated and other good things. So that's good enough for me. When I read this, and I'm going to continue reading here a few more sentences, it seems we need to ponder that. How to protect ourselves from this future new age, new world order, this new Hunger Games movie thing. And it does, when I pray now, and I see miracles happening in my own life, and I say, how did that sequence of events happen? How did that happen to me? How did I get so lucky? And I remember praying about it or asking about it to the higher power. And poof, like even my friend says, my girlfriend, she says, you know, that those things happen. Miracles to people all the time. And even in Jesus' time, there were miracles. Even with the exodus of the Hebrews from Egypt, slavery, there were divine interventions, the plagues, the parting of the sea. And then, of course, you got Noah's flood, where he was told to make a big ship and get in it. And because of the polluted DNA and the evil in the world, apparently this spiritual being on high, whatever God is, had to erase everything. Had to get rid of the polluted DNA and the evil peoples. Just stuff to think about. Let me read the book some more. Again, I go off on a tangent. You don't have to believe what I believe, but you certainly can think about things and formulate your own opinion. Once said a friend of mine that people who take UFO abductions seriously are cultists. So some people who said if you believe in this stuff, you're a cultist. It's really nothing more than a cult. The events happen, the landings take place. These seem to be facts, if you believe what I'm reading here in these other books, which there are thousands of books and thousands of cases. The soil is altered, people are taken, floated out of their homes or cars, incisions are made, samples are removed, UFOs have been photographed, tracked on radar, pilots and astronomers have seen them, and various government agencies have investigated these miraculous events. So again, not to be the religious part of anything, but I believe that this is a kind of a reality, just like we're spiritual beings in these biological bodies. I think it's all connected, including with the Illuminati and the satanic goings on in the world right now. All in the Bible, foretold. Read Revelations. I can't wait to get the Book of Enoch in the mail and go over that. And I got the Book of the Dead in the mail the other day. I've got a lot of work to do. So people would say, I can't understand. It doesn't make logical sense to me. So I can't accept it. Again, I'm going to remind people. You need to be spiritually grounded. I'm not trying to preach a religion and tell anybody to be a Baptist or a Catholic or anything. I believe in Jesus, and Jesus said, whoever believes in me shall be saved. I'm going that way. Because I know, as the person I am, I can't fight these people. These evil people who are doing whatever it is they're doing. Joyce Lloyd's memories of lying paralyzed beside the large craft-like object in the middle of the field, her memories of the ascending light and the strange figure she saw in her son's room, all of these have the echoes of other UFO abduction reports. So there's many similarities to this, according to Budd Hopkins. When she first awoke and found herself with her feet on the pillow and her head at the foot of the bed, she wakened her husband and asked him what was going on. So she finds herself upside down in bed. Need we not remember the movie Exorcist? And the girl is floating up there and demonic voices are coming out of her mouth. What is real? So she asked her husband, what's going on? I'm upside down in the bed. My feet are on the pillow. But the situation remains one of other cases in which this sort of thing has happened. On October 16th, 1973, Patty Price and apparently 4 of her 7 children were abducted from their house and taken into a landed UFO. In Coral and Jim Lazarin's account of this, I believe I have some of Coral and Lynn Zazaret's books on UFOs and abduction cases. I've got hundreds of books I haven't even read yet, and I'm still buying books. So let's read this here. In Coral and Jim Lazarin's account of this event, hypnotic and normal recall by 3 of the principal abductees details what happened that night. So even in that event, they were hypnotized. Relevant to Joyce Lynn's situation, however, is one particular detail. 3 of Patty's children awoke in the morning to find themselves in different locations than they had been in when they went to bed the night before. So whatever these beings that abducted them, they did not put them back to bed in the proper places. No one was literally upside down, but it is clear that when the Price children returned to by their abductors, there was a certain degree of carelessness about who was put into which bed. So the kids woke up in each other's beds. Moving on here, Sandy recalled what she remembered that a tube of liquid had been inserted in her ear as part of what seems to have been an implant operation. And when she awoke, she found that her hair and neck were inexplicably wet. Her husband, like Joyce's, confirmed these odd physical details. So there were people collaborating that these things really happened. Her husband saw it. For that matter, Kathy's UFO dream experience apparently involved a gynecology examination, had a strange physical aftermath. She had gone to bed wearing panties. We read this earlier. But in the morning found them lying neatly outside the covers on top of her bed. It's kind of considerate of the aliens to bring the panties back. This makes you wonder, they seem to be not to kind of remember important details like that if they were trying to hide something. Two people besides Kathy are the central figures. Her best friend Nan and her next door neighbor Joyce. As detailed in Chapter 2, Joyce was involved in Kathy's original June 30th, 1983 backyard experience as a witness. She saw the flash of light from the Davis' yard. When the UFO presumably took off, she heard sounds, suffered a power outage at her house, and was apparently prevented in some way from calling the Davises to see if they were safe. So they immobilized her. Okay, last bit here, page 107. One of the many variants in UFO abduction accounts is the degree of amnesia one finds among the witnesses. The spectrum is as broad as one can imagine, ranging from some people who remember nearly everything at the time, the way one remembers a mugging or an accident, to some who remember almost nothing. Psychologists have noted how often the human mind seems unable to deal out traumatic recollections a little at a time, so that our minds release a little bit of traumatic information at a time, so that consciousness is not swamped by too many suddenly disturbing memories. This built-in self-protectiveness is something I've noticed frequently in UFO abduction cases. So your mind can't take too much at once. It gets swamped and it creates blanks or blockages in your brain. And a lot of these Illuminati abductees or sex slaves or satanic ritual slaves, like Arizona Wilder with David Icke video, or Kathy O'Brien, who was raised as a child for these satanic rituals by the elites. They traumatize them. They put them in little rooms with no clothes, close the door, no lights, for days to create this blockages and things in their mind, and then they can program these people and trigger them. Mind control slaves. A lot of this on the internet. Just look up Kathy O'Brien or Arizona Wilder, and you'll see many other peoples who are whistleblowers who are come forward. One series I was watching for a while there was, what was his name? The Basis series. You can look that up, the Basis series 742. I'll have to think of his name. But he interviewed a lot of people that were human slaves in cages in many different parts of the world. And they told us some horrific stories. Little babies put in a cage with a boa constrictor so the boa constrictor could eat it. And other horrific things these people witnessed. So again, who are these aliens? Why are they abducting people? What kind of power do they have that they can put people in trances or zombie-like states? And what's it got to do with all this bizarro stuff, like the Basis series, or all these other stuff like Arizona Wilder, Kathy O'Brien, and so many more? Go look up Witches' Holidays, and go see what's going on in the world right now. What is coming? We're learning a lot about what has happened. But it seems to me to be important for we the people to start asking ourselves, what is coming? What should we be prepared for? What should we believe? Thank you for watching my video. Rick Marico reporting.